introducing the Introduction to Trauma-Informed Care for Parents online course. At Big Brothers Big Sisters, we want you to know that your child's safety and well-being is first and foremost in our minds, and we recognize that far too many of our children have been exposed to violence and trauma. So, we created this course to help you learn more about trauma and the impact being exposed to trauma can have on a child. You'll also learn about how we approach child and family exposure to trauma as an organization and receive resources that may be helpful to you and your family. And this course is free to parents and guardians of children in a local Big Brothers Big Sisters program. For more information about this course, contact your local agency representative.
Welcome everyone to the 4th Annual Youth Safety and Wellbeing Summit. Shout out to the network leaders, board members, and for the first time ever, parents and bigs joining us. We are here to talk about what gives us hope and the important role we play as caring adults in supporting the mental health and well-being of young people. Now, we're going to share practical tools that Big Brothers Big Sisters of America and our partners have created to provide you with the language, knowledge, and skills you need to make a potentially life-saving difference in the lives of children and youth. Feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout our conversation, and folks from our team will be monitoring. If we can't answer you today, be on the lookout for our upcoming network news. And let us know where you're joining from today in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, let's jump into it. In December 2021, Big Brothers Big Sisters of America responded to the U.S. Surgeon General's call to action for individuals, communities, schools, and organizations to step up to help address the mental health crisis. Since then, we've been working with leading experts to develop new tools and resources for our local agencies. 70% of our agencies have taken advantage of the trainings and tools we're providing in youth mental health. Thank you to all of you. And some of our agencies, some of you actually on this call today, have 100% of your staff trained in evidence-based full-day youth mental health first aid course. That's an applause, folks. Now, we're going to continually work to create and expand our offerings in this space to all of you, working with partners like the ones who have joined us here today. And this is just the beginning of our work in this arena and our commitment to continuing to expand this work in our nationwide strategic plan. Our youth are not alone. There's a whole village looking out for their well-being. Now, before I introduce our panelists, I want to share a message from our 2020 National Big and Little Sisters of the Year, Little Brianna and Big Ashley from Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Central Texas.
I met Brianna when she was in 8th grade. And she is now a graduate from high school, and she has her own job. She lives on her own. I entered into our match with wanting to start off slow. I knew that I had to build trust, be vulnerable. Throughout this process, one thing that I've really learned is listening, active listening, and just being present for her. I needed to put myself in the background and make sure that she felt loved and supported.
She made me feel safe by just being there and listening, understanding. A lot of people that I have tried talking to in the past didn't seem understanding or like they were actually there for me. So it was nice having somebody to be there for me and to listen. Literally everything that me and Ashley do together positively impacts my mental health. I think that going out and doing things and talking to her, or when I was living in South Carolina, like FaceTiming and things like that helped me a lot.
The way that Brianna's mom and I worked together to support Brianna was just communication. Being able to talk to her, like having that relationship, that just helped. Checking in of seeing, well, how were things during the week? Really kind of build the whole picture together, because we all have one way that we experience things, and then there's others who kind of see it from a different perspective. But for both of us, I asked her, I was like, well, what do y'all need? You know, what is it that you need from me? How can I be there for you? How can I be there for Brianna? And it was literally just showing up. It was the presence of being there that was helpful.
I think what my mom did that was most helpful and supportive was honestly signing me up for to have a big sister.
Thank you to Ashley and Brianna, and a special shout out to Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Central Texas for the work you do for young people all across the state of Texas. This is a powerful example of extraordinary relationships between our littles and bigs. Connections like these highlight the important role we play in meeting young people where they are and providing them with the connections and support they need to help navigate their mental health. Now, let's move on to our incredible opening panel. Let's have each person to introduce themselves. And I'm gonna start with my dear friend, April. And before April comes in, I wanna highlight that April is the co-author of an upcoming book by the time you read this. This is a very special book, written in part by April's daughter and my friend, Chesley, who tragically lost her life to suicide in 2022. But that's not the entire story of who Chesley is. Chesley's life is defined by happiness, joy, the joy that she brought to others, the inspiration, the power of who she is as a person. She served on the National Big Brothers Big Sisters board, not only as a board member, but as an advocate for young people and a partner and a dear personal friend. This book will be released on April 23rd, and I encourage everyone who's watching right now to pre-order it on Amazon and tell all your friends. It is a powerful read. And I'm excited now for April to share a little bit more about herself and her role of being on this panel. April, my friend.
Thank you, Artis. I am April Simpkins. I am a Chief Human Resources Officer for a national company by day, but the work I'm most passionate about is being a mental health advocate and a NAMI ambassador. And I would be remiss if I didn't add that I'm really, really proud to be a mom. And there's so many challenges that my children have today that my older children didn't have when they were growing up, or me. One of the challenges I see is just this constant access to information. It can leave our children with anxiety, fear of missing out, and stuck in fight or flight mode. And so I'm thrilled to be here today to be a part of this conversation, to talk about how we can support the mental health and well-being of our young people, because they really are growing up in a different world, different than the one we grew up with.
April, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
You know, one of the things we're also very proud of is to have incredible partners and advocates who are out in the space telling this story and hoping to empower and advocate for young people. Phyllis, you're one of those individuals, and we're proud to have you here today. Phyllis, share more about yourself.
Thanks, Artis. Hi, everyone. My name is Phyllis Holditch-Nylon, and I am the Senior Advisor for Preventing Adverse Childhood Experiences in the Division of Violence Prevention, which sits within the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control at CDC. We at CDC really believe that we all have a role to play in ensuring that all children have access to safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments. At CDC, we try to better understand the prevalence of adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and better understand how they impact lifelong health and well-being, including physical, mental, and behavioral health and life opportunities. We support and develop and try to synthesize the research on the best available evidence for how to prevent ACEs, mitigate their consequences, and promote positive childhood experiences. We also work with and fund state and local partners to help them use the best available data and science to implement strategies to prevent ACEs and promote positive childhood experiences. We believe that the prevention of ACEs and the promotion of positive childhood experiences is critical to addressing what our Surgeon General has called a national youth mental health crisis.
Phyllis, thank you so much for being here as well. I think the next person on our panel list really doesn't need an introduction to the Big Brothers Big Sisters community. However, we're going to have her introduce herself because she has made such a transformational impact across our movement and across the vision of the agenda of the work for young people here in America as we talk about mental health and emotional well-being. Julie, share a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you for that, Artis. I am Julie Novak. I serve as Big Brothers Big Sisters of America's Chief Youth Safety Officer. I came to Big Brothers Big Sisters locally and then nationally about 30 years ago, so 3 decades committed to this mission. I came from out of college working for a few years and doing direct service in domestic violence and sexual assault, and that really gave me my entree, I think, and committed me to this work. I had graduated with a degree in economics and planned to go do public policy, and this felt more important. So I want to just speak to, obviously pretty obvious why I'm here, but I just want to speak to the with respect to mentoring and Big Brothers Big Sisters really being a solution to, as you mentioned, the Surgeon General called it a youth mental health crisis. He's also called it an epidemic of loneliness that children are suffering with today. So for myself, Artis, our national team, we know that mentoring works, and we know that mentoring young people that need us the most is not something that's just, this would be nice to do. It is a necessity, and it is a moral imperative. So that's what we're here to talk about with you today. I just want to say on a personal and professional level, I've witnessed, I've had experience, lived experience with individuals that are really struggling firsthand with their own young lives, and adults as well, with challenges, mental health challenges. And I felt the deep pain and anguish that comes with that. It's a long haul. It's just to think about our littles, and because I served as a local CEO for 11 years, I know our littles well, and saw their own challenges that they faced. And it's just heartbreaking to me to think about one of our littles suffering with a mental health challenge and doing it alone. So that's what we're here to change.
Wow. Thank you, Julie. So we're about to have a really powerful discussion today, folks. And I want to just remind everyone that if you have questions, comments, thoughts, that we have a chat box, right? So make sure, again, that you put your questions, your comment in the chat box, and the team will either get back with you or we'll have some follow-up that'll come from there. And stick around for the entirety of this, because there's going to be some really powerful resources that's going to be shared as we go throughout the journey here with this panel. So let's move to the panel. And Phyllis, we're going to start with a question for you. Your work centers around toxic stress, exposure to violence, and other experiences that impact the mental health and well-being of youth and families. How do these experiences impact mental health?
Thanks, Artis. As I said earlier, we are confident, and the evidence suggests that preventing ACEs and promoting PCEs, or positive childhood experiences, is really critical to improving youth mental health. At CDC, we define ACEs as potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. This is anywhere from birth all the way through age 17. And these include things like experiencing or witnessing violence, experiencing neglect, and other experiences that can disrupt a child's sense of safety, stability, and bonding. Things like growing up in a household with a caregiver with substance abuse problems. On the left-hand side of my screen, you'll see the original ACEs that were measured in the original 1990 study on ACEs that looked at the impact ACEs had on adult health outcomes. But we at CDC and our partners and researchers in the field recognize that this is not the whole universe of potentially traumatic experiences that can happen to children. So on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see potential expanded ACEs, like witnessing other forms of violence, like community violence or violence from a peer or a teen dating violence partner, or experiencing things like housing insecurity or homelessness. We know that ACEs have a dose-response relationship with all of these outcomes and more across the lifespan. We're here to talk today about youth mental health. But what this means is that the more ACEs a person experiences, the higher their likelihood of experiencing all of these outcomes and more. We used to think that the impact of ACEs was really more through behavioral health. So we know that ACEs increases risk for cancer, say. And we used to think that a person who experienced ACEs might have more higher likelihood of abusing alcohol or smoking, and that would affect their risk for cancer. But now we know that ACEs can increase toxic stress or result in toxic stress. This is a heightened and prolonged activation of the stress response system. And we know that this has impacts on brain development, our endocrine systems, our immune systems, and even gene expression. I'm going to go quickly through this slide. This slide depicts what we call the pair of ACEs that was really developed by our colleague Wendy Ellis and her colleagues. ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, are the tree above ground. But you see that below ground in the soil that the tree is growing in, these are adverse community environments. And this slide is really to show that we recognize that the health inequities that are represented in the soil can both contribute to increasing the risk for ACEs and exacerbate the effects of ACEs. But another type of childhood experience that's really important for youth mental health and other health outcomes are positive childhood experiences. We know a little less about the effects on health outcomes than we do about the effects of ACEs, but we're starting to understand how prioritizing positive childhood experiences can help improve youth mental health and other outcomes. And this graphic really shows how we are researching and trying to better understand the effects of positive childhood experiences. For health outcomes, we're talking today about youth mental health, so you can kind of mentally plug that in there. At the bottom of the screen, we see the direct effects of positive childhood experiences on youth mental health. We know that having a non-familial, trusted adult, like a mentor or a big, has positive impacts on youth mental health, academic engagement, and reduced substance use, just to name a few. The pathway at the top is the prevention pathway. So we understand a little less about this, but we know from emerging research that positive childhood experiences can prevent adverse childhood experiences from ever happening in the first place, therefore reducing the negative impacts that ACEs can have on youth mental health. And then finally, the pathway in the middle is what I call the mitigation pathway. What this means is that positive childhood experiences, even among kids who have already experienced an adverse childhood event or some other traumatic event, can really help buffer the negative effects that ACEs have on youth mental health. So it really shows the many important pathways that positive childhood experiences can influence youth mental health in a positive way. This slide shows our ACEs Prevention Resource for Action. Published in 2019, this synthesizes the best available evidence for states and communities and policymakers and gives them strategies to prevent ACEs, to mitigate the consequences of ACEs, and to promote positive childhood experiences. There's a QR code here on my slide that you can use to download this resource, but it's also available in your attendee hub. And in this prevention resource, there are 6 strategies that are based on the best available evidence. And each strategy has approaches to advance that strategy and examples, but not a comprehensive list of evidence-based programs, policies, and practices for each approach. Here you can see all 6, but I want to highlight the 5th strategy, connecting youth to caring adults and activities. The 2 approaches under this strategy are mentoring programs and after-school programs and activities. And we always talk about Big Brothers, Big Sisters under mentoring programs as the oldest and most well-known evidence-based mentoring program. I'm sure I don't have to tell this audience this at all, but youth who participate have better mental health outcomes, academic outcomes, lower substance use and delinquency, just to name a few. I want to point out 2 more resources that we have available. Our prevention resource is available on our regular website, cdc.gov, but we also have a website called Veto Violence. This shows our suite of ACEs trainings. The one at the top is for general audiences, and then we have 4 profession-specific ones, one for mental health providers, pediatric healthcare providers, educators, and faith communities. And then finally, on Veto Violence, we also have this ACEs infographic, and this is a screen grab from that infographic. It's great for sharing with partners. It follows a child as she grows up and becomes a parent and shows how we can support families to make sure all children have healthy, happy childhoods so they can thrive.
Phyllis, thank you for outlining that for us. That is so powerful and so important. And it continues to lead into the conversation with this panel. And April, my next question is for you. Can you tell us more about the work you're doing with an incredible partner and leader in this space, the National Alliance on Mental Illness? Some of you may know as NAMI,
Yes.
right? Tell us why this is so important right now.
NAMI is an incredible organization that has been around for decades. And there are a few things that I'm particularly proud of that NAMI does. The first would be family-to-family counseling and peer-to-peer counseling. I can say, as the parent of a child who battled a mental illness, it impacts the entire family. And so the fact that NAMI will partner you with someone who has lived experience and do this family-to-family counseling or peer-to-peer counseling is powerful. Additionally, NAMI has hundreds of affiliate locations across the nation. As a matter of fact, if you go to NAMI.org, you will be able to plug in your zip code and find the closest location to you. And that's so important because, as Julie and Phyllis already mentioned, there is an epidemic of loneliness. And so for not just adults, but young people to be able to go into these kind of counseling sessions or support groups and see other people like them, to know that they're not alone, is powerful. Something else that NAMI does is provide lots of education. So if you're a parent and you're not sure what's going on with your child, to be able to go to NAMI's resource page and read through some of the mental illnesses and some of the signs that you may see and where you can find support is an imperative. NAMI has a fantastic class called NAMI Basics. It's 6 sessions and also experience-led by trained instructors who walk parents through, and not just parents, but adults in general, like our bigs, walks them through working with and supporting a child who has a mental illness. I could go on and on with all of the remarkable things that NAMI does. Something else I'm particularly proud of, and I'll end with this, is the partnership with Siri. If you have an iPhone, as a matter of fact, if you say to your iPhone, Siri, I'm feeling kind of depressed today, what should I do? It is no surprise that it will pop up a box and ask if it can call a friend or family member or connect you with NAMI, and you can click on the link right there.
Wow, that is incredible. That is incredible. And I love what you talked about from the idea of both peer-to-peer and family to family, because that's so important to know that we're not alone.
Yes.
And even our agencies listening today to know that their services and support, that they don't have to feel alone in trying to support their families, support the young people, support bigs. So that's so critical.
Absolutely.
And as you talked about sort of that journey and that experience, you know, we have young people, of course, who struggle, right? Who struggle with this challenge of how do I navigate and how do I navigate the experiences of what I'm feeling. How can we recognize when a child is struggling with their mental health? And then what are some of the signs to look out for?
I love that question, and I'm often asked that question as a parent who had a child who was battling her mental health. And the truth is, artists, sometimes you won't recognize the signs. Especially if they are trying hard to hide them. And that's why it was so important for me as a mom to make sure that my children are connected with a community, with support, that there are other people in their lives that they may turn to. Let me just give you an example. If my child is dealing with a foot injury, it doesn't matter how great a podiatrist I take them to. It doesn't matter if I took them to the best heart surgeon, not going to be able to give the same support that a podiatrist would. And the same goes for us as parents. We just may not see some signs, but if they have support and a collective, a big in their life who is looking through a different filter, they may see something. And hopefully they've built a relationship where that child feels very comfortable talking to them. You know, something else I would add that we do for our children when it's difficult for them to talk to us, their parents, is we started this drop the cone of safety expression for them. So when our children come to us and they say, I need to drop the cone of safety, that immediately triggers us to stop what we're doing, form a safe space, because we don't know what they're going to say. It could be I broke the lamp. It could be I said something inappropriate. And we listen to them and provide support and resources. It may be, this is a time you need to sit with a guidance counselor and talk through what happened. It may be, let's figure out how you can earn some money to replace that lamp. But whatever it is, they don't battle the anxiety of not knowing what to do. And lastly, I will say that when Chesley passed, she left 5 siblings behind. And they all dealt with grief differently. So I could not assess one based on the grief that I saw exhibited in another. I really had to look at them as individuals. And I would say the same thing when we are talking about mental health and mental health challenges. Is signs you may see in one may be very different than signs that are in someone else. And this is why, and I can't emphasize this enough, it is important for children to have that community. And that's one of the things I love about this organization.
Yeah, thank you so much, April. You know, as we continue, Julie, you know so well that we've heard about the power of connection and positive experiences in community, as April just talked about, for youth to promote mental well-being. Tell us more about the role of mentoring programs and supporting parents and children as they navigate and try to ensure that they're experiencing and have the type of support around their lives.
Yeah, so thank you. We have been working with a new partner since last year called the Crisis Text Line, and they have done incredible work nationwide. They recently released a study that I want to cite from, asking tens of thousands of young people who had called into their crisis line when they were going through experiencing a mental health crisis. They asked them what they most critically needed. The answer from youth revealed 6 resources, but the top one to help them cope was opportunity for social connection. So, and that's interesting, I think, especially in the backdrop of COVID and thinking about what happened through the pandemic. Additionally, since from 2010 to 2021, local governments have cut funding for parks by more than $2.5 billion. The number of children participating in high school sports for the same time period dropped by 1.4 million. We know that from our nationwide outcomes, Big Brothers Big Sisters nationwide outcomes, that our mentoring relationships build connections, not only with their big, but with their parents, with their peers, with their schools. We also know that the connection Big Brothers Big Sisters creates leads to an increased sense of belonging in mentored youth, to reduction in depressive symptoms. And I know when the first time I saw that was 2011 or 13 when a study came out that was based on Washington State and mentoring programs, predominantly Big Brothers Big Sisters programs. And having experienced, worked with and had people close to me struggle with depression, I thought that was so powerful because I know how hard it is to impact it. So we also see in Big Brothers Big Sisters mentored youth improved social emotional regulation, and ultimately our research tells us to follow up on what you had said earlier, Phyllis, is that 82% of our littles maintained their mental health and well-being or improved it. So those are big stats.
Yeah. And as you think about those stats and you talk about the services, we know that there is a lot that we all can do, right, to help fill the gaps we know exist and to better support you through their struggles. So talk a little bit about that. What is it that we're capable of doing to support this community, this ecosystem in a very intentional and thoughtful way?
Yeah, so I love that question, and I think that it's one of the reasons I'm so happy that today we have, I think, around 500, something like that, bigs and parents joining us for this session. And historically, they are the difference makers. So historically, we achieve our outcomes that I just cited through just our the high quality mentoring that we've been doing for 120 years. But we also know that 50% of youth with depression do not receive any treatment. Over 32 million children live in areas where there are not enough providers to address their mental health needs. Many of these resources are even more limited in rural communities and underserved zip codes within cities. We also know that on average, there's a 10-year gap between the time that a youth starts onset of a mental health challenge arises, roughly around, I think, average is age 14, and the time that they receive help, the professional help that they need. For BIPOC youth, that wait is even longer, so 10 years. So there's an opportunity for Big Brothers, Big Sisters, our bigs, our parents, our professional staff, to fill that gap, which is incredible, and to provide, as I said, the resources and supports that help children not feel alone. And that doesn't mean that we're asking people to be, I think it's really, really important, we're not asking people to be therapists or counselors, and they all have a role. I have a couple of daughters that are in those fields. They do really, really important, difficult, painful work. But I think what is important is that, if we think about that impact we have just by providing our high quality mentoring services, what even greater impact could we have if every adult associated with our organization was trained to identify, understand, and respond to a mental health challenge arising in youth. And those signs you talked about, April, they're all over, training. I mean, but they're not intuitive by any means. We're not born understanding how to recognize a mental health challenge or how to help people through it, how to support young people or adults through it. So I think it's really, really important for us to provide that the language for BIGs, for parents, for our professional staff, and the training and supports that they need to help support a youth through a mental health crisis, just help support their mental well-being. So we've created nationally, Big Brothers Big Sisters has worked with other partners, and we're going to keep doing this to create more resources to train individuals, as I said, to help them understand the language, the skills that they need to better support children and youth. And I think that's it. These resources are free to our local agencies and to the individuals watching this. So go to our website for more information and look at the materials in the hub.
Yeah, and I just want to double click on something Julie just said there, and I'm going to spell it, FREE, free. Free resources, folks, right? I know sometimes you're like, man, how much is this going to cost me? Free resources to be able to provide this type of support just by going on to our website and some of the other resources that you've heard here. I also want to call out, Julie, something that you said that just stuck with me. You talked about a 10-year gap for young people from the time a need for help is identified and actually getting needed mental health services. And that gap can be even longer for BIPOC youth, as you just mentioned as well. April, let me transition back over to you. With that sort of revelation that Julie has just shared, what do we know about what works to create a safe and inclusive environment for discussions on mental well-being?
Focusing a little bit on the BIPOC community, many times mental health and wellness is tied to things like culture or religion. Yeah. And so from a very young age, children are exposed to conversations that they don't participate in, but certainly overhear about what triggers mental illness or what triggers a mental health condition. And so there's a fight with that. Additionally, there's access. Unfortunately, many times in communities where there may be socioeconomic disparities, there aren't a lot of counselors set up there to serve those communities, which is extremely unfortunate. Something else that I will say that parents can do is not just get counseling for yourself, but when looking for a counselor for your child, and I say this not just for myself or because I'm a mental health advocate, but because it's true, that there are times when you want to talk to a counselor who shares either your ethnicity, your faith, or your lived experience. And statistically, 87% of most counselors are white. But if you are part of the BIPOC community, if you are part of the LGBTQ community, you may want to talk to someone who understands your experiences, and that is the filter they listen to you through. So I would say to parents, especially in the BIPOC community, continue to search. You will find a counselor that works not just for you, but also for your child. Something else I will say is that when you are supporting your own mental health, say that out loud. Say it out loud to your children. The goal is truly to support your mental health and well-being. And we often say things like that includes self-care. Yeah. And many times when I am taking care of myself, I say that specifically to my children. I am going to do this because it makes me feel good and it feels like self-love and self-care. When I'm not okay, I use those words to my children. I'm not okay right now. I think I just need to go sit and journal. That always helps me feel better. Or I think I'm going to go for a walk. That always helps me feel better. So when we begin to open up that language so that children know that the end goal is to maintain good mental health and well-being and not just to wait until we hit crisis, I think it would certainly reduce part of that gap.
Yeah, I love the say it out loud and
Yes.
the sense of vulnerability with that. You know, as you think about, you mentioned parents, right? And talking to all the adults, right, who are watching here as role models for
Yes.
youth, parents, bigs, other caring adults. How do we manage our own mental health, right, and well-being? Because part of this is like it's like I think people always use the example of the airplane, right? Put your airbag on.
100%.
So that you can. So how do we show up as our best selves
100%.
for young people?
There's a few things that I will say, and something I've noticed, especially as a mental health advocate, is there are words people mumble, like mental health or mental illness or depression, anxiety. So the first way we show up is we normalize it to ourselves. Use that same tone of voice when we talk about mental health support, mental crisis, etc. Again, when I talk about seeing counselors, I can't stress this enough, that counselors and therapists are not really crisis managers. The best time to see them, to the point of putting the mask on yourself first, is before that crisis would occur. It's so imperative to make counseling, therapy part of your life, just like you would going to the gym or going for your regular checkup. Do it ongoing so that if a crisis hits, you've already got that connection and you're already equipped with tools, just like we talked about on the airplane. The other thing I would say is to take care of ourselves in these ways, and I say some of this even as an HR professional. Get sleep. We discount that so much, and we give ourselves a million reasons why we need to pull an all-nighter or stay up late or work on this thing or, kind of revenge insomnia, they call it, when you just stay up late because that's the time you can control. Focus on your nutrition, focus on your physical health. All of these things are tied directly to your mental health and well-being. And so I say for adults, take care of yourself and mirror that good behavior so that your littles, your children, our young people have that example. Representation matters. And when they see you taking care of yourself, they are more inclined to take care of themselves. And I would say finally, especially as parents, as adults, as bigs, our role is not to be a savior. We are supporters. And one way that we can be supporters is to know the resources that are available, test those resources, and be prepared to refer to those resources. I'm a runner. I'm getting ready to do a New York Marathon for the third time. And the last time I ran the New York Marathon at mile 24, it's 26.2 miles, but at mile 24, I hit a wall. If an Uber had been driving by or a taxi cab, I would have jumped in and just gone to my hotel. I was so exhausted. But my best friend was there, and she met me at mile 24, and of course she told me I didn't look good. But she gave me so many words of encouragement. She set out a little, she called it a lawn picnic that had like goo and water and other things that could help me, tools that would help me make it to the finish line. What she didn't do was try to carry me. What she didn't do was try to throw me on her shoulder and walk me there. That would be impossible. She couldn't do it, and that's not how the race works. And I think as parents, we have to learn to support our children, to give them the tools and equipment. Our role is not to try to be saviors, but to be the best supporter that we can be.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you. Julie, can you also talk about our partnership with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network? And it's the closing session of this summit on Thursday afternoon. And it's going to be addressing vicarious trauma and workplace wellness for our professional staff. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, so obviously that the field of vicarious trauma and the impact of working with, alongside and supporting children and youth and adults that are impacted by trauma, exposure to violence, in communities and homes, just hearing sad stories and taking it home with you is a heavy weight to carry. It's painful to those of us that are working to help individuals that are struggling. So we've heard from our local agencies over and over and over that they want more resources to help them help their staff and their bigs and their parents deal with vicarious trauma. So again, can't begin to dive into a subject of that magnitude here, but what I can say is I am so excited to be working closely with a new partner, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. As you talked about, our team, our youth safety and wellbeing team, has really just watched them from afar in a way. We have been huge admirers of the work that they do. They produce so much incredible stuff. Again, free resources. So some of our agencies heard, our leaders and professionals heard Trip Ake from the National Traumatic Stress Network at our Capitol Hill Day speak poignantly about this subject, as well as the children's mental health crisis. And we're really excited to be bringing them to a session. Our closing session will be a hopeful session, but also I think a healing and helpful session for our professionals nationwide to share resources, again, not only for themselves, but with bigs and parents as well. And I would also say, my team, our youth safety and wellbeing team, is not unaffected by what we see. We're helping agencies through crisis on a regular basis, that we see a shooting in a community, a suicide of a little, and a child running away, you name it. And so, for everyone's sake, it's really, really important that we recognize that impact and, as you said, April, beautifully, take care of ourselves.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. Phyllis, as we move over to you, we also know that plenty of children who face painful experience, and some of us who were those children, but also had joy and fun, love, and support. Where do these experiences come into play in youth well-being?
Yeah, Artis, I think that's what's so exciting about positive childhood experiences. We can all promote positive childhood experiences for all children. We know that they have direct positive impacts on youth mental health, but as we discussed, they can also prevent adverse or bad experiences from happening. And if kids have already experienced trauma, they can help them be resilient. Positive childhood experiences can help them heal and can prevent kind of the negative impacts of ACEs. So I think that's what is so amazing about these experiences is they have the direct effect on youth mental health, but they can also prevent the negative consequences that can come from trauma and adversity.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. There's also a video that I want to make sure that we have opportunity to go to be able to cue here for a second.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Kaplow, and I'm the Executive Director of the Trauma and Grief Center, or TAG Center, at the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. Here at the TAG Center, we work to ensure that any child who experiences a trauma or the loss of a loved one receives best practice care. And very much like Big Brothers and Big Sisters, we are committed to nurturing children and strengthening communities, which is why I'm so honored and excited to be part of this Youth Safety and Wellbeing Summit. So today I'd love to talk with you about how caring adults, just like yourselves, can help children who've experienced loss. So you might be wondering, why are we so focused on bereavement or the death of a loved one? And the reason for that is because bereavement is actually the most frequently reported type of adversity in clinic-referred youth, as well as across the entire world. It's also the most distressing form of adversity among adults and youth in the general population. So if you were to ask anybody what is the hardest thing that's ever happened to you, the vast majority would talk about the death of their loved one. And finally, it's the strongest predictor of poor school outcomes above and beyond any other form of adversity, and that includes things like physical abuse or witnessing domestic violence. Now, that being said, not all children who experience bereavement will experience those types of problems. And in fact, most kids who experience a loss will go on to lead healthy, happy, productive lives. There is no right or wrong way to grieve, and despite what society tells us, there is no set timeline for grief. And in fact, grief is not a problem to be fixed. It is a natural part of life and a reflection of the love we have for the person who died. So just like the waves of the ocean, grief reactions will ebb and flow. And the idea here is not to rid children of grief. The idea is to provide them with the tools necessary to be able to cope with those waves when they feel so big and strong and overwhelming. In our work with bereaved children, we have recognized that they tend to grapple with three primary grief-related challenges. And the good news is that there is so much that adults can do to help children to overcome those obstacles and deal with those challenges head on. And the first challenge is, of course, missing them. We've heard from almost all bereaved children that they really, really miss the person who died. And there are many things that adults can do to help with that. And the first and most important is to talk openly about the person. Many times we as adults shy away from bringing up the person's name with the child because we don't want to upset them. But what we've heard from children time and time again is that it actually really helps them to talk about the person and helps them to feel not so alone in their grief. We can also help the child to write a letter to the person. What are things that they want to say to them? We can help them to identify tangible mementos, things that they can hold on to that remind them of the person and help them to feel close. And finally, we can find opportunities to remember the person. So even something as simple as having a place at the dinner table during holidays for the person who died, or having the child hold a photograph of the person during their graduation. The second challenge is another very common one, and this is feeling lost without them. In other words, we hear kids saying things all the time like, I don't know how I'm going to get through life without my dad. But we also hear them saying things like, I want to live the kind of life my dad would have wanted me to live, or I want to do things that would have made my dad proud of me. And adults can really help with this. They can help them to identify traits or behaviors, positive traits or behaviors that they had in common with the person. This can be as simple as you are so kind and thoughtful, just like your mom. And also finding ways to carry on their legacy or honor their memory can involve things like even identifying talents or skills that they had in common and helping the child to pursue those, whether that's through just a hobby or even a career. And then finally, worrying about the way they died. We see this all the time in kids, especially where the death was under traumatic circumstances. But what we also find is that most children naturally gravitate toward wanting to change the circumstances of the death into something meaningful that can help other people not have to suffer in the same way. So for example, a teenage girl who loses her mom to breast cancer may want to raise money for breast cancer. Or a boy who loses his siblings suddenly may want to become an ER doctor to be able to save people in the way that he wishes his brother had been saved. So in other words, as adults, we can help children to brainstorm about the many ways in which they can turn tragedy into triumph and help to ensure that no one else has to suffer in the same way. And so in conclusion, Big Brothers and Big Sisters can play such an important role in supporting children who have experienced loss. The TAG Center looks forward to working with your organization to ensure that all of your caring mentors are equipped with the tools necessary to promote resilience in children. And also, all of the resources that we talked about today are available on our TAG Center website. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for the amazing and life-changing work that you're doing.
What a powerful video, right? And we wanted to show you that because studies show that children who have role models are more likely to do better in school, have better connections with family and friends, are less likely to be involved in delinquent behavior. As adults, we must serve as role models for youth. And this includes talking about mental health and how to manage our emotions, express our feelings, and ask for more help when we need it. And that's why we are so excited about this Mental Health Champions Challenge. Some of you may have seen it. Yet, this is going to be one of the things that we're really excited about around the Big Brothers Big Sisters movement and beyond, because we have an opportunity now to engage more people into this topic and to take action. Let's run the video.
We're excited to announce the release of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America's Youth Mental Health Champion Challenge, a micro-learning experience that will be delivered straight to your inbox. It's designed to help caring adults learn the signs that a young person may be having a mental health challenge and understand how to help. When the next challenge begins, you'll receive a text or an email that brings you to a new lesson each day for 5 days. Each 5 to 10 minute lesson covers a new topic with practical strategies and tips around how to have conversations with young people who may be struggling, breaking down stigma, and encouraging mental health supports. The challenge features littles and staff from Big Brothers Big Sisters of Miami, sharing messages of hope and real-life examples of what support looks like in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole.
Show up on time.
Show me that I could always count on you. If you'll tell me you'll do something, do it.
Stay calm and be patient with me.
Let me share my feelings when I want to.
Show me that it's okay to ask for help.
Sign up to take the challenge. Simply scan the QR code using your phone's camera or visit the link you see on your screen to complete a short sign-up form. You will automatically begin receiving your daily challenge lessons when the next challenge period begins. Thank you for your interest in becoming a mental health champion.
All right. Are y'all ready to take the challenge? I hope so. This is going to be some really exciting stuff. As we think about rounding out our time here, I want to ask one last question to our incredible panel here. And it's a question that really sort of transitions from the last video that you saw, is what gives you hope for youth mental health and well-being? And April, we'll start with you.
You know, the fact that we're doing this, that we're normalizing talking about mental health is so valuable. And my hope for youth is that as they move into adulthood, they continue this momentum of talking about mental health, of seeking support, of practicing self-care, and locating resources.
Very well said. Phyllis.
What gives me hope, artists, is that we can create and promote positive childhood experiences, like having trusted relationships with family and parents and bigs for all children. And also that ACEs are preventable, but even when they have happened, we can wrap our kids in these positive childhood experiences so that we can interrupt the consequences of that trauma. We all have a role to play in ensuring safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments for all children.
Thank you so much, Phyllis. Julie.
Well, there's so much that gives me hope. First, I would say, when the Surgeon General released his report in 2021, and we talked about it among our national staff and leadership and with our network, there was overwhelming support to meet the challenge and to take up his call to action and to, to get busy. Being part of the solution to what we know is a devastating thing for our kids. So that's the first thing. Brianna and Ashley, for my career in Big Brothers Big Sisters, give me so much hope. Probably the primary place my hope comes from to continue to do this work, because children are strong. They're not broken. They can overcome. And I guess what I'm probably most excited about is, as we have taken on this call, as I said, taken up the call to action of the Surgeon Generals, we've asked for help and support from the village around us. At the local level, experts like NAMI and your organization, CDC, so many that you saw here today, and you'll hear from throughout the rest of our summit going on for the next few days. I'm just excited that we are really, with something like the Mental Health Champion Challenge. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it's helping raise awareness and educating people about having the right language, learning to, as I said, identify, understand, and respond to a challenge, a mental health challenge in youth. So harnessing the power, that's what I'm excited about, and seeing where that'll take us.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let me just thank this amazing panel. So informative, so insightful, so inspiring. And I hope one thing that you all are doing right now is, because we can't give a standing applause right now because we're not all in the room, but you can give an applause in the chat box, right? So give an applause to this incredible panel. Also, if there are things that you heard that you just want to raise your hand to, give a big ups, right? And a shout out. Put in the chat box. Let's hear back from you and things that you found exciting. I just will share a few things just as we close here, as a few things that I took away. Just this powerful concept around how we think about ACEs, right? And positive childhood experiences and the power it has to influence youth mental health and to be supportive in preventing ACEs in young people's lives. We play a role. We all play a role in this. This idea of family to family and peer to peer, which I thought was so powerful, and the connection that we all can make. And when you think about Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we are so connected. We also talk about young people being in the center, right? And this community and this ecosystem being around them. And that connection that we have, family to family and peer to peer, is so important in the work. And it goes back to something else that was said, this power of community, right? The power of community to bring the village around. That's how we help and support the young people that we serve, and that we also understand the uniqueness that this struggle is unique to each individual. No one deals with it the same, and we have to ensure that our way that we approach it and how we build relationships also understand the uniqueness of every young person and every child in terms of empowering them. Our programs work, right? You heard Julie talk about that, right? So you can walk into the work that you do, the partnerships that you build, the investment that you ask for, understanding that our programs are evidence-based. This is not some level of anecdote only that we understand. We understand that there are numbers, there's data, there's research, there's outcomes that back up that what you do every single day works. And that's what you heard from this panel as well. And something else I just want to call out. We're not counselors, but we provide care, right? And it's about this community of care in a young person's life, continuing to coach and support our volunteers and others who come around and engage in positive adults and young people's lives, about not having to feel like you're a counselor, but the idea of care. And say it out loud, right? I love that term, say it out loud, and being able to express your own vulnerabilities, right? Modeling to young people, modeling to the young people in your life the vulnerabilities that you have in the very most appropriate way in terms of being able to show and practice the idea of support and having self-care about your own life. And then remembering this last thing, right? While we're in this because of young people. We're in this because of their voice. We're not here to save them. We're not saviors. We're here to support them. We're here to empower them, because the power of what we do every single day is about giving young people the platform to not only change their lives, not only change their community, but to do things that ultimately can change this world. Be sure to stay to the very end to find out how you can get our great new tool, the Mental Health Champion Challenge, that you can access right there on your phone with reminders about the things caring adults can do every day to help a young person. When it comes to reaching more young people nationwide, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, we know we can't do it alone. It takes a village. That's why we are so grateful to our fantastic partners like NAMI and the CDC. Another great partner from the Meadows Mental Health Policy Institute. We know that the pandemic brought a great deal of loss to our children and youth nationwide. Big Brothers Big Sisters youth were especially affected by the death of a loved one, and we also know that littles are more likely than the general population to experience loss, such as parents incarceration. I hope that you take that video and you use it and you leverage it more. And last but not least, be well, take care, and have a great day. Thanks, everyone.